This episode of Distraction is sponsored by Landmark College. Try their free comparison tool for colleges with learning disability support at lcdistraction.org. Landmark College. Learn your way. Succeed uniquely.
I've watched now as a mom and as a former coach, I saw him struggling and I saw the coaches struggling to understand these kids and to realize that there's a lot more to ADHD than a kid who can't sit still.
Hello, this is Dr. Ned Hallowell, and welcome to Distraction. Today we have an unusual episode. I want to introduce you to Susan Stout, the owner, producer, organizer, founder of Own Beat Athlete, which is an organization that equips coaches with the tools they need to coach kids with learning differences. I've never heard of any organization like it, and it sounds absolutely wonderful. I want to learn more about it, so let's, with no further ado, invite Susan to jump right in and tell us how she came up with this idea and tell us all about Own Beat Athlete.
Okay, that sounds great. And I'd like to start off also by thanking you for having me here. I've been following your work for a long time, and I'm excited to talk with you.
Thank you so much.
Own Beat Athlete came about as really the culmination of what, on my end, is sort of a twisty professional path, and then my own personal experience as the mom of a boy who has ADHD as well as dyslexia. To go back a little bit, I started out as a swim coach and then a elementary and middle school teacher, and then I worked for a series of educational nonprofits and eventually decided to go to law school in part to pursue my interest in the legal end of the education world. And while I was in law school and after law school, I did on a pro bono basis, I represented students in the D.C. public schools who were not receiving the special education services to which they were entitled. I've always sort of had my hand and my interest in that end of things. And then 11 years ago, my son was born, and pretty early, around the age 4 or 5, he was first diagnosed with dyslexia and then with ADHD. And we were fortunate in that we found out early, so he has always been in schools where he was celebrated and understood. And I, at that point, really took an interest and dove in. I could just tell, even at that young age, his brain and the way he experienced the world was so different from mine. And I really want to understand what was behind that, what was behind the behaviors I was seeing, how to bring out the what I now call in my project the superpowers of the ADHD brain.
Good for you. Good for you.
I was, again, so fortunate because I was surrounded by all of these professionals, both at his school, and I became the person in charge of bringing speakers into the school. So I was learning all of these things about the brain and about the children. And then he got to an age where his primary interest, and still is, and place where he gets the vast bulk of his confidence, was sports. And He started to play, like a lot of kids do, soccer and swimming, and basketball is the one that really stuck. So I've watched now as a mom and as a former coach him go through different experiences with rec league coaches and with coaches at the travel level, and at each point I saw him struggling and I saw the coaches struggling to understand these kids and to realize that there's a lot more to ADHD than a kid who can't sit still. And there's a lot more behind the kid who's not following directions than, a kid who's trying to have a bad day, which is never the case. So I realized, wait a minute, I used to be that coach. I was that coach who didn't know, and now I know. And most of these coaches are very well-meaning, and they would love to make the kids' experiences better and their own times easier. And so I thought, I would like to now take this information I've learned as a parent and a professional and introduce it to as many coaches as I can get to listen.
So how did you begin to reach out to these coaches?
So I started out with the goal of doing a blog and writing about it. And then the more I talked to people, the more I realized that there really was just so much sort of thirst and interest in this knowledge. And so I put together a website that has very, succinct and sort of like I say to the coaches, get to the point about these are the basics. This is what's behind the behavior. This is how to recognize it. And these are the tools. There are bullet points, 11 bullet points to look for, 11 bullet points for what to do, and also communication strategies, because I think that a lot of times they don't know. A lot of times the kids don't want to share. The parents might be afraid to share, and they're just not getting the information that could be so useful to everyone in the situation.
And would you just, how would you walk up to a coach? How did you gain entry? Yeah. How did it work?
Well, I just launched it in January, and so I've been pursuing sort of a two-tiered approach. And one is, as you say, very grassroots. I still have a lot of coaching connections. There are a lot of coaching organizations, and they do training for their coaches. And so I have been working with, getting the word out to professionals and coaches and organizations that I know. And then the other approach is sort of from the top down and getting the word out to some of, trying to get the word. This is an ongoing challenge of trying to get the word out to some of the big structural organizations of the sports. And I've had a number of conversations with some professional athletes who have had dyslexia or ADHD or anxiety. And by making those connections, then the hope is that it can also start to trickle from the top down.
So I was surprised, actually, to hear you say the coaches were very eager and willing, because I've dealt with a number of coaches who just are the opposite. They say, this kid has a bad attitude. He won't follow directions. He won't listen. I tell him what to do, and he does the opposite. And it's very hard for them to understand that it's not that he won't follow directions, is that he can't remember them. And he's perfectly willing to, but he's unable to. And I've dealt with coaches who just think this whole diagnosis is a lot of baloney, and all he needs to do is try harder and get punished if he doesn't succeed.
Yes, I think that's right. What I'm referring to is the coaches who I have spoken to and gotten through to, and they get it. And then what I see is, oh my gosh, and those are the receptive coaches, and the ones I think when you can position it as not only is this helpful for the kid, but this is what's hard for you. This is what you're seeing in your practice, and we'd love for it to be out of compassion for the kids. But even if it's not, even if you are an old school coach who is not interested in that, then these are things that can actually make your practices run more smoothly. And I say, on my website and in talking to people, make the whole team function better. And, what they really want to hear too is then help you to win. Your practices are smoother. You're getting the best out of all of your kids. These kids may have some difficult behaviors they don't understand. A lot of times they think it's just the kid who can't sit still or interrupts, and they're missing the social piece and the emotional piece. And when they can start to understand that and see how it can benefit them and their team and their record, then they become much more perceptive. But you are right, and you've hit on something. The old school coaching culture is, you play by my rules, and you're not going to question my authority, and you're going to be tough, and I'm going to yell at you, and, I don't want to hear about why that's hard for you. But I'm also taking a lot from the new methods in education and the new principles and understandings in parenting philosophy that have also changed a lot since the 70s and the 80s, and trying to bring some of those things to coaching. And it can be a tough audience. But I really do think that when there's an understanding, it's not being soft. In fact, I say very often the practices and the understandings that I talk about are helpful for all kids. It's just good coaching. And then the fact that you understand why certain kids have a particular difficulty with following a two-step direction or listening to you talk for 20 minutes or, being screamed at in front of the group, just makes it that more helpful for them.
Yeah. And these kids, most kids with ADD are unbelievably hardworking. They're tenacious and competitive, and they'll work their butt off for you. I mean, if the coach can just understand that it certainly is not a matter of not wanting to. And it's funny, one of my first adult patients was Rick Fox when he played for the Celtics. And
really?
When we got him diagnosed and on medication, he went back and talked to Dean Smith, his coach at UNC, and Dean Smith said, "Now I understand why you just disappear in the middle of some games. I wouldn't understand why you were just not with it at all." And it was because he was ADD, and sometimes he would just have sort of an ADD moment, and he just was, out of the game basically, and then trying to get back into it. So the world is changing. People are beginning to understand this is not a matter of lack of discipline. It's not a matter of intentionally failing. And I love the way you say your superpowers, because that's been my stance for 30 years. That used properly, these are the X-men and women. If you learn how to manage it right, it takes you to the very top. And I'm so glad you're bringing it to the world of coaching, because if these coaches could only understand, these are some of their most talented players.
That's right. I mean, you hit on a number of them. My list of superpowers includes, they're used to working hard, they're tough, they're wise beyond their years, they can hyper-focus, they have a lot of energy, they can see the whole field in a way that other people can't. They're perceptive, so all these strengths that you really want to have in your kids, and you can bring those out, or if you're not able to understand them and coach them, then you're not going to get that benefit on your team because they're going to be struggling. I'm very interested about Rick Fox, not only because I went to Duke around the time that he was at UNC, but so I remember him from the basketball court, but I recently read an article that someone had written about the NBA and the huge percentage of players in the NBA, estimated around 20% or more, who most likely have ADHD, and how a lot of them are saying, well, I don't want to be on medication because this is what makes me great. This is, and of course, that's a different discussion. But I think that getting coaches to listen and hear, wow, lots of these really successful athletes are wired this way. This is not an Achilles heel. This could be their superpower. So that's part of my approach.
Oh, and what the athletes need to understand, used properly, the medication won't take anything away from them at all. It should be like eyeglasses. It allows you to use your superpower more effectively.
That's right. Then you've got both. You've got a superpower that you can channel. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. When it's used right, it makes you more effective. I mean, Rick's game improved tremendously when he was on medication. So that's something that people often misunderstand, that medication used properly should have no side effect other than cutting your appetite.
Right. That's right. And I think that's something for coaches to understand too. That's where conversations, another thing that I really emphasize in my work is getting to know each particular kid. I mean, even once you've learned what I am hoping to teach you or what others are about the ADHD, get to know that kid, because it's going to look a little bit different in each kid. Understand, maybe he's taking medication and it wears off around practice time, or maybe you can talk to the parents about, what that all looks like, and just really understanding each individual, and this is a piece of it, but it's only one piece of it, but an important piece to let the parents and the kids know, hey, don't be afraid to talk to me about this. It's not going to affect your place on the team. If anything, it's going to raise your play and our relationship.
Absolutely. And it's so important to destigmatize it, so that they can talk about it openly. And like you said, it's not going to cost you. If anything, it'll improve your position on the team. Yes.
So those are sort of the three things that I say. I know coaches don't have a lot of time, and I do provide things that they can print out, and take with them. But what I really want them to walk away with is I need to have these nuggets of understanding, and then I need to go to each kid, and of course not these kids, who I suspect who might be causing me problems in practice, or who might be late or unprepared or can't find their jersey or whatever it is. Every single kid wants to do what you're asking them to do. They want to participate. They want to participate fully and well and be the best they can.
Absolutely.
And this behavior, it's not about you. It's not personal. It's just they're trying their best, and something is difficult.
Yeah. My nugget to sum up ADD, it's you've got a Ferrari engine for a brain with bicycle brakes. And if you tell the coaches that, they'll get that, because it really does sum it up. And then say, you're a brake specialist, and with your help, he'll learn how to strengthen his brakes. And one of the best ways to strengthen brakes is sports.
One of the blog categories that I have that I do try to keep in a way that coaches will have time to read is called Dear Coach. And I've written it from the perspective of the athlete. And, for example, writing the coach a letter, hey, I'm sorry, I blew up in practice, or I forgot my jersey, or this. And here's what happened to me that day. I went through my day. I felt like I'd messed up 100 different times. I got to practice, and, you said one thing, and it set me off. But I think for coaches to understand, they see a kid, and especially in my experience, a lot of these kids who it's just hard getting through the day.
Yes.
And they show up at 5:00, and the coach that's the first they're seeing, and not appreciating all of the things that have happened before, to really just get a perspective on, I really am trying. This is something that is hard, and as you say, something you coach, can be the specialist and help me to be the best I can be. I love that, the Ferrari with the bicycle brakes. I shared that with my son, and because we talk a lot, and again, he's been fortunate at school to talk a lot about his brain and how it works. But even knowing everything I know, I still have to stop and think and ask him all the time, why is that happening? What is going on there? And so what I really want the coaches to do is to get into the mode of questioning. It's not that they're going to read this and all of a sudden everything's going to be perfect, but of going from a place of curiosity and understanding rather than assumption.
Well, it's so wonderful. If you can get into these coaches' organizations, because as you say, it's such a realm of importance for these kids. This is where so often their self-esteem gets redeemed, or destroyed, depending. But if these coaches can understand that these kids are just going to play their hearts out for them, and if they can understand that when they don't do what they're told, it's certainly not because they don't want to. They literally forget what they've been told, and so tell them again and again and again, and just make sure they're getting the right help from the right doctor. And it's wonderful what you're doing. I wish that more people were out there like you. Are you in touch with other athletic programs in the area? You must be, I'm sure.
I have been. I am right now trying to figure out the most efficient way to get the word out, with my time and others that I'm working with, as far as, you can do the local, door to door, or I'd really like to leverage some of the larger organizations, and as I say, some of the bigger names that will often get someone's attention. If you can say, hey, Jovan Hay, NFL player, is one I talked to who has dyslexia and ADHD, and he talked to me, and then they're much more interested in that story than something that they may not see as relevant to sport. So
right.
I am trying to do both ends. And, as you say, coaches, they're in the perfect position to be that role model, especially as kids get to be closer to teens and they're looking for someone who's not their parents, and they're looking for a place where they can be successful and find their thing. And I think a lot of coaches understand that, and they feel good about that, their role in that way. And another thing that I'm trying to do, I'm getting out the word. It's one reason I really appreciate you having me on, to get out the word to different communities. And I find that it becomes a little bit like a telephone tree. If someone in one sport gets interested, and then they can connect me with their governing body or association, and try to get the word out that way.
Yes.
But I'm also trying to, write in various places and see. I'm trying to learn where coaches read. Did they read coach and athletic director, or where are they going to see it? And trying to put that hat on as well. Yeah, absolutely. Because sports are so important for these kids, so important, and the traditional old-fashioned coach just doesn't get it. And just like the traditional old-fashioned teacher doesn't get it. A lot of teachers just, all they say is try harder. And it's like telling someone who's nearsighted to squint harder. It doesn't get the point. They're well-meaning. These teachers are well-meaning, and these coaches are well-meaning. But until they understand the basic issue behind ADD, they're going to do more harm than good. Right. That's one of the things I try to say on my site is, if a kid came into practice with a broken leg, you wouldn't ask them, they can't fix that. The kid with ADHD can't fix their listening skills any better than that person can fix their leg,
Right.
And it's just so hard for the coach to look at the kid and say, well, how could you possibly not, know that direction? I just said it. It must be on purpose. You must not be respecting me, just for them to understand that that's just how their brain is different. It doesn't work that way. But here's what does work, Yeah.
Well, my goodness, Susan, you're doing really important work for these kids, and you're quite an amazing mom, attorney, and you're adding a lot to the world of advancing this cause. I can't thank you enough for joining me on my podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And this doesn't feel like work because it's so near to my heart, and I just hope to help as many athletes and coaches. And I really appreciate your assistance in spreading that word.
Well, thank you. And if people want to learn more about what you do or get involved, your website is ownbeatathlete.com, correct?
That's right. And that's the best way. And I have had some people reach out through there, and I always answer, and am happy to help them spread the word in their communities however I can do that. So I would love to hear from them.
Susan Stout, quite an amazing woman doing incredibly important work. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
As always, please reach out to us with your questions and show ideas by calling 844-55-CONNECT or by sending an email to connect@distractionpodcast.com. Today's episode of Distraction was recorded and edited by the dapper Pat Keogh and produced by the effervescent, fresh from Hawaii, Sarah Curtin.